I'm Ryan Howes and this is ERG Technique. This week we're going to be talking about tapping and legato, what they are and how they can be achieved. So first things first, what's tapping? Tapping is where you're using both hands on the fingerboard. This allows you to do extended hammer on and pull off freezes and do arpeggios without having to use a pick effectively. So a lot of guitarists, when they first start playing genres such as metal, they'll very quickly start trying to tap. They'll typically do the triad kind of thing that you'll hear in tracks such as Eruption by Eddie Van Halen or Metallica's One. This is a very basic but effective way to utilise tapping, however it's come leaps and bounds since then. Someone who comes to mind when I think of tapping, someone who excels at tapping would be Tosin Abasi. A lot of the time he's using tapping to play multiple phrases at the same time, as opposed to the traditional triad or standard arpeggio type of tapping. In terms of arpeggio tapping, people like Matthias Eklund, they implement it in a way which is a bit more creative than the traditional triadic tapping, in the sense that they use it to extend intervals that you wouldn't typically hear. So jumps upwards of an octave inside this tapping, so it gives it a really exotic and out there sound. So a really easy way to start with this triadic tapping is tapping hard with your right hand and then having your index finger at the lowest note in the arpeggio. And as you're taking your right hand up off the fingerboard, you're going to be pushing the string to the side, effectively plucking it with that one finger that you're choosing to use. It's just the most basic way of starting out with this technique. Eventually you could be doing things like tapping out of nowhere with your left hand or with your right hand. It does take some force and some practice to do this, because when you're tapping you are going to be making some noise if you're using a high gain tone, because you're going to make the guitar vibrate sympathetically. Tapping is an atypical technique when it comes to guitar, in the sense that your hands are typically synchronized when you're doing different techniques, as in they're actuating and fretting at the same time. But in this instance they are acting independently of each other, which is atypical of what you would come across in guitar. Here are some tapping exercises to get you started with this technique. So next thing is legato. I would say legato is very closely related to tapping, in the sense that traditional legato, you're tending not to use your right hand and you're purely tapping out of nowhere or pulling off with your fretting hand. A lot of guitarists, when they're first trying to get into lead work and they're trying to do the whole Yngwie Malmsteen or Paul Gilbert kind of shred thing, typically you're using legato without realising it. This is because of poor synchronization between the left hand and the right hand. So instead they pick the first note on every string and hammer on with the rest of their fingers. This is a rudimentary form of legato and is a great way to introduce legato into your repertoire of techniques, because you're using the plectrum to inject that first bit of energy to carry off the rest of the phrase. Some argue this isn't true legato because you're using your right hand and you're not purely using fretting, but this is a great way to implement this technique. Someone who really excelled at legato was Allan Holdsworth. He was an amazing player, it sounded incredibly fluid. The reason he got so good at legato was because he always wanted to be a trumpet player, but he played guitar. A good way to really develop your legato would be to use a noise gate and get it so that you can play through the threshold, and then once you're playing through that, maybe crank the noise gate a bit higher and try and play through that. It'll really develop your finger strength so you can pull off legato phrases nice and cleanly and loud. Legato is a great technique when you want to try and get fluidity to your playing, because it's taking away the pick attack and it's great for speed because you're not having to worry about any kind of drag from the plectrum. Legato can be difficult when you've got less of a distance to hammer on. So for example, if you're hammering on at the first fret, that can be quite difficult because there's a lot of tension between the nut and the fret you're about to finger. This applies for all of the neck, so if you were starting a phrase on the 12th fret and then you're tapping the 13th after that, you're going to have some difficulty getting the volume through with that 13th fret. Yet again, this is another great way to really build up on your technique, and you could perhaps do the 4-note string chromatic exercise that many people do with their picking. It works great for legato as well because every note that you're hammering onto will have a tremendous amount of tension to it. So here are some exercises for legato.